The call that blew a hole in Phil Kaufman's night came around 12:30 a.m. Wednesday, September 19th, 1973. Phil's girlfriend, Kathy Fenton, picked up and handed the phone over. The voice on the other end was Dale McCroy, sounding small, sounding frayed, and thin from a hospital in Yucca Valley. "We have a dead body on our hands," she said, "and I believe it's one of yours." It was Gram. Of course it was fucking Gram. Phil rubbed a hand across his tired face. Grief could wait. There was a job to do. In minutes, he was behind the wheel of his girlfriend's creaky old VW bus. Kathy kept him awake as they chugged east on Interstate 10, heading towards Arizona. A song from Gram's new album, as yet unreleased, ran through his head. Return of the Grievous Angel. Gram, and his dynamite new singer Gram had found at a club in D.C., Emmylou Harris.
Won't you scratch my itch, sweet Annie Rich? Welcome me back to town. Come out on your porch and step into your parlor, and I'll tell you how it all went down. How were the truckers and the kickers and the cowboy angels, and a good saloon, every single town.
Out with the good truckers and the kickers and the cowboy angels, and a good saloon in every single town. "God damn it, Gram," Phil Kaufman said aloud to the night. Beside him, in the noisy old bus, Kathy just nodded. The sleeping suburbs of Los Angeles slowly gave way to the empty black night of the Mojave. The Joshua Tree Inn was quiet when they arrived, but the air was thick with panic. Phil found Dale, the responsible one, frozen in place, eyes wide with a useless animal panic. Add Margaret Fisher into the group, who was a wreck and still high. His first job, get control of the chaos in Hotel Room 8, manage the scene and the witnesses, make sure the final squalid moments were erased before the authorities started digging in too deep. According to his version of the story, Phil found the pills and powders easily enough, and in a final absurd act of protection, buried them in a hole in the desert. By the time he had the situation contained, the sky in the east was dawning in a bruised purple glow. Then it was on to the High Desert Memorial Hospital. The basement morgue, fluorescent lights, and a cold chemical indifference. There, Phil Kaufman performed the formal identification. Gram Parsons, the Grievous Angel, the Cosmic Cowboy, dead of an overdose at 26 years old. Back in the VW, the fluorescent hum of the morgue faded. The grief was still there, a cold, dense mass. But another part of Phil's brain was coming online. The part that booked the tours, paid the roadies, and navigated the chaos. They called him the road mangler for a reason. His mission, to this point, had been simple: clean up and extract. Now, it was time to figure out what the hell happened. As they rattled west, Phil began the debriefing. He was no longer a grieving friend. He was the mangler. One final time cleaning up after the brilliant, troubled man-child he'd just left on a morgue table. Dale was shell-shocked, mute. Margaret was still swimming in a chemical haze, but she slurred out the details. Gram had been washing down pills with tequila all day. The saloon jukebox had one of Gram's songs on it, and they played it over and over. Gram got up and sang Okie from Muskogee with the house band. After closing time, Gram had wanted to cop more. Some trailer park girl with a baby on her hip came by the motel. She sold Gram some vials of morphine sulfate, ripped off from the military hospital at Camp Pendleton, she claimed. And the inevitable conclusion, the ice bath, the attempted CPR, the final rasping breaths. As the high desert gave way back to suburban sprawl, Phil Kaufman exhaled and downshifted. The immediate crisis was contained. The witnesses were secure. The story, or at least the version of it he wanted the world to know, was taking shape.
This old town's filled with sin. It'll swallow
Back in Los Angeles, the adrenaline wore off, replaced by a dull, heavy ache. Phil's house filled with friends, a sad impromptu gathering of the tribe. Then came the phone call that turned everything sideways. It was Bob Parsons, Gram's stepfather. The message was cold and clear. Gram's body would be flown to New Orleans for a private family service, and none of Gram's friends, not Phil, not the musicians, not the women who loved him, were invited. Then someone brought it up. The pact. A couple months back, on July 15, 1973, Clarence White, a talented guitarist who had toured with Gram, was killed by a drunk driver after playing a gig out in Palmdale. Gram and the Mangler and a bunch of Clarence's musician friends and hangers-on all attended the funeral. It was a staid and square religious service. The man being memorialized that day bore little resemblance to the musician they had all known in life. Afterwards, a large group, led by Gram, retreated to a local watering hole to toast Clarence and share memories. Standing at the bar, Gram made his request. "Fuck that straight-laced funeral jive. Mangler, if I check out first, take me out to Joshua Tree, burn my body up, and set my soul free." A bro hug, a handshake, and a shot of tequila sealed the deal. For all his cynicism, Phil took promises seriously. Now that promise hung in the air, a direct challenge. Phil Kaufman had no immediate answer. His grief and anger had him stuck in a failure loop. "I should have been there. I could have stopped him. Gram would still be here if. Kathy's voice cut sharp and cut short the Mangler's impotent little guilt trip. "Shut your fucking mouth and do it," she said. "Do it or shut up." The words hit him like a slap. Fuck. She was right. In that moment, impotent grief transmuted hardening into a single sharp point. A mission. A crazy, illegal, beautiful mission. One last loadout for Gram. Mission is a generous description. It was more a series of desperate, impulsive moves. But the Mangler was an imposing guy and a virtuoso bullshitter. He figured he could bluff his way through and keep them a step ahead. First, intel. Phil worked the phones. He learned the body was being shipped out from the Continental Airlines freight terminal at LAX, going out that evening. Next, an accomplice. This wasn't a one-man job. Dale's boyfriend, Michael Martin, was impressionable, perhaps a little starstruck by the rock and roll lifestyle. He seemed unfazed by the macabre nature of the undertaking, so he was in. Check. The car was the easy part. Dale McElroy was, improbably, the owner of a cherry red 1960 Cadillac hearse. Check. Michael got behind the wheel. The Mangler cracked open some liquid courage. They reached the LAX freight terminal just after 8. When the mortuary truck arrived, Phil intercepted it. He talked his way past the driver. A change of plans. A different airport. He signed the paperwork. Jeremy Nobody. In Phil's telling, and to be completely fair, it sounds a lot like a barroom story. A good one, granted, but still a story. Anyhow, according to the Mangler's version, a cop car pulled up as they were loading the coffin. Never breaking character, Phil called out, "Hey, buddy, can you give us a hand here?" The cop got out and helped. Pulling away, Michael scraped the hearse hard against the hangar wall. The cop made a smart-ass remark, shook his head, and watched them leave. They were clear. Phil took the wheel and pointed them east back out to the I-10. Once they were outside of L.A., they stopped for burgers and a beer and filled a jerry can full of high-octane gas. The pump jockey asked them, "Who's in the back?" "Some lucky stiff," Phil replied. They reached Cap Rock after midnight. No particular significance, according to Phil. They were just drunk and tired, looking for a spot wide enough to turn the big caddy around. Getting the coffin out was an awkward, graceless affair. Fueled by booze, adrenaline, and a dwindling supply of nerve, the two men wrestled it to the sandy earth. It landed with a thud. Sorry, Gram. Off in the distance, Michael spotted some headlights. Phil opened the coffin, doused the body, and tossed a match. A massive fireball split the desert night. Phil watched the body burn, black smoke spiraling upward. The final check. As the flames rose, they cast a long shadow. That shadow crept west, back across the Mojave, over the San Gabriel Mountains. It fell silently across the sun-drenched hills of Laurel Canyon. A darkness that would touch everyone.
This podcast is music history, education, and commentary. Some coarse language is used and adult topics are sometimes discussed. It may not be appropriate for young children. Welcome to Rock and Roll Archaeology from Pantheon Media with your host, Christian Swain. Digging into music, culture, and technology. Past, present, and future. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back, diggers. Christian Swain, your rock and roll archaeologist here. Real quick, hey, do keep an eye on the website. There's a lot of activity going on over there. We're changing some things. The first thing you're going to see is we have a new partner for merch. It's called Fourth Wall. We feel it's a huge upgrade for us. A lot of new swag will come from there. Very high quality product. A lot of neat things with that, so we're really excited about that. Patreon members, first of all, thank you all very much for being a part of our Patreon patron system. If anybody else wants to be a part of that, look, man, there is a free tier. And $1, what's $1? You know, geez, that's a pack of gum these days. So I think we're worth a pack of gum. I don't know. What do you think? So anyway, we would appreciate it if you would take a look at what's going on over there at Patreon. By the way, I'm spending some time over there myself. I am communicating like a social media influencer or something. Rock's Back Pages. Make sure you visit Rock's Back Pages if you're interested in rock journalism, especially in the golden age. Barney Hoskins and company have got it going on, so check that out. And that's kind of it. What's going on here for this month? This big new episode that we're putting out there. All right, a couple of quick notes. First, we do want to point you to episode 15, Slouching Towards Bethlehem. That's our LA episode that covers the late 60s. And it's a good companion to this episode. Second, a special call out to a fine rock journalist and friend of the show, Jeff Slate. We picked off a couple of key ideas from Jeff in our discussion of the Eagles, and we want to warmly acknowledge his contributions. We'll take a break real quick to pay some bills, and we'll be right back with the setup. And we're back. So that story we told in the opening, the promise, the hearse, the makeshift funeral pyre under the desert stars, it's one of the great weird tales in rock and roll history. It feels like a standalone myth, a drug-fueled fable. And while some parts of it are almost certainly exaggerated, it is largely true. It actually happened. That bonfire was not just a bizarre final chapter for Gram Parsons. It signaled the first tremor, revealed the pressure building deep beneath the sun-drenched, harmony-rich LA music scene. In that weird act of misguided loyalty, we see the twisted, faulty logic of the entire scene, the fierce, almost tribal bonds that held it together, the casual relationship with chaos that threatened to tear it apart. Yes, it's weird and it's dark, and we just love a story like that. but it also pulls back the curtain, reveals some of the unspoken codes and consequences of a world built on talent, ambition, and excess. In the words of Hunter S. Thompson, one of the best chroniclers of the time, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. All right, let's do this. Friends, we're very excited and proud to give you episode 28 of Rock and Roll Archaeology, Songs from the Fault Line.
Mr. Lonesome LA Cowboy, hanging out, hanging on to your window ledge, calling your name from midnight until dawn. I'm in smoking dope, snorting coke, trying to write a song.
The night sky above Los Angeles offers only a faint memory of stars. Their ancient light is overwhelmed by the modern glow of the city. Travel east, though, out of the city across the fault line and into the desert's indifferent grip. Here, the stars are no longer vague suggestions. They are sharp, brilliant points against the absolute black. Twisted Joshua trees, deep arroyos, and broad mesas define that landscape. Jagged rock formations cut sharp profiles against the starlit dome. The edge of the Mojave, a place of stark beauty and geologic tension. A piece of the most infamous and dangerous fault line in North America, the San Andreas, defines the southwestern border of Joshua Tree National Park. 130 miles due east of downtown Los Angeles. The 1970 U.S. Census was the first count in 150 years that no longer showed New York as America's most populous state. The Golden State took the crown, and she has yet to relinquish it. Most of California's population, 20 million at the time, about double that now, lives on or near the San Andreas Fault. Just a bit north and west of downtown is one of the first of many, many LA suburbs, the Echo Park neighborhood. It pushes up against Dodger Stadium, lying just to the east, surrounded by its vast acreage of parking lots. Sunset Boulevard bisects Echo Park, before it starts winding northwest through Silver Lake and into Hollywood. A couple of blocks off Sunset, at 1020 Laguna Avenue, Jackson Browne rented a little downstairs studio in 1970. It was a humble space, perhaps a converted garage. Upstairs, a larger bungalow-style apartment was leased out to a pair of roommates, J.D. Souther and Glenn Frey. Upstairs at 1020 Laguna, late 1970 and early 1971, Glenn Frey was attending a master class in songwriting he didn't even know he'd signed up for. He wanted to write his own songs, but how was it done? What was the process? Did you just wait for inspiration to strike? The answer came to him through the floorboards. Glenn would hear a tea kettle whistle every morning. His downstairs neighbor, Jackson Browne, was starting his day. Then Glenn would hear him at the piano, playing the first verse of a song, 10 times, 20 times, more, until every note and every syllable was exactly where it needed to be. Then, silence, and a moment or two later, the tea kettle again. Jackson taking a break, thinking, resetting. Now, 20 minutes later, the piano would start again, this time working on the chorus, or the second verse, or the bridge. Day after day, this was the routine. Tea kettle, repetition, silence. Tea kettle again, pause, then more repetition. For the ambitious, restless Frey, it was a revelation. Lying on the floor, he was reverse engineering a method. How to write a song. As Frey himself would later put it, I'm up there going, so that's how you do it? Elbow grease? Time? Thought? Persistence? It was a lesson in discipline that Glenn Frey would internalize and take with him for the rest of his career. He and Jackson Browne would both apply that same dogged persistence, that elbow grease, to their work. But they would use it to build very different things. Browne, the introspective poet, used it to chisel a song down to its most emotional, honest chord, no matter how long it took. Fry, the ambitious pragmatist, would apply that work ethic to make a song undeniable, polishing it until it was perfect for the radio.
Walking slow down the avenue through my old neighborhood. I don't know why I'm happy. I got no reason to feel. Well, I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load.
Unlike most everyone else in our story, Jackson Browne didn't make his way to L.A. in search of a dream. He had his roots already put down. Clyde Jackson Browne was a military brat, born in Heidelberg, Germany. At the age of 3, he moved with his family to his grandparents' home in the Highland Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. They soon relocated to Orange County in 1966. Jackson graduated from Sunny Hills High School in Fullerton. By his late teens, he was already a known quantity, a published songwriter with a knack for melody and a melancholy worldview that seemed far beyond his years. Right after high school, Jackson did a stint in New York's Greenwich Village. He fell in with the folk scene, got his songs recorded by artists like Nico and Tom Rush. He returned to L.A. in 1968 and quickly became a stalwart in that emerging scene. The Troubadour Club in West Hollywood, more about the Troub in just a bit. Glenn Frey wasn't the only budding L.A. songwriter Jackson mentored. Around this time, he also struck up a friendship with Greg Allman. Greg was still marooned in L.A. fulfilling contract obligations, while big brother Dwayne was back in Florida putting the Allman Brothers band together. We mentioned that in our last episode, Southbound. In his memoir, Greg warmly recalled Jackson's generosity and support. He wrote Dreams, the first of many great tunes he would pen for the Allman Brothers while he was in L.A. hanging out with Jackson. A few years later, Greg rearranged one of Jackson's earliest songs, These Days, and put it on his first solo album, Laid Back. Jackson then turned around and used Greg's arrangement for his own version of These Days.
Well, I've been out walking. I don't do that much talking these days. These days. These days I seem to think a lot.
A young, ambitious manager and agent named David Geffen spotted Jackson early on, singing at the Troub. When he approached Ahmet Ertegun at Atlantic Records about a deal for Jackson, Ahmet passed. David tried to press him a little. This kid could make you a lot of money, Ahmet. You know what, David? I have a lot of money. Why don't you start a record company, and then you'll have a lot of money? In exchange for a 50-50 split of future profits, Ahmet Ertegun put up the seed money and agreed to distribute the new label. Asylum Records, headed by the wonderkid himself, David Geffen, and his partner, going back to their days in the mailroom at the William Morris agency, Elliot Roberts. The first Asylum signing in early 1971, Jackson Browne. And as of 2025, David Geffen is one of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in the entertainment industry. Yeah, Ahmet Ertegun was right. The jukebox in the corner playing Tumbling Dice, a party in progress. In 1970s LA, the party was at 9081 Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood, a little 2-story commercial building. On the long black awning, sprawled across it in kind of an Old English script, Doug Weston's Troubadour. From the outside, it's unassuming. Inside, it was everything. As you head in, off to the left, through a doorway, a small bar, a cozy little hangout for the regulars. There's a gentle, sloping walkway that brings you into a tight, dark listening room with a tiny stage. Now, to the right, as you face the stage, the long main bar. Up and behind you to the left, a booth with the soundboard. More tables ring an upstairs balcony, bring the total capacity to a sweaty maximum of 500 or so. We're at the epicenter of the LA singer-songwriter movement, where the fault lines of ambition, talent, and commerce ran right up against each other. A weekly ritual took place at the Troub, advertised on local radio with a simple, punchy promise. Monday night is Hoot Night. Now, this wasn't some coffeehouse open mic. This was the gauntlet. Aspiring performers lined up for a shot at playing 2 songs for an audience sprinkled with the likes of David Geffen, Elliot Roberts, and every other manager, producer, and musician who mattered. Passing through that gauntlet could change your life. The Troubadour was a high school cafeteria, corporate boardroom, and church, where bands were born, deals were made, and the hierarchy of the scene was established. At the center of that universe, holding court in the front bar, the queen of the scene, Linda Ronstadt.
You and I travel to the beat of a different drum. How can't you tell by the way I run? Every time you make eyes at me, whoa, you cry.
If Jackson Browne was the scene's resident poet and craftsman, then Linda Ronstadt was its voice. Born in Tucson, Arizona, Linda Ronstadt grew up in a house that was a living museum of the American songbook. Steeped in the soulful canciones of her father's Mexican heritage, the big band standards of her band leader grandfather, and a radio that brought in everything from Hank Williams to Ella Fitzgerald. By the time she arrived in Los Angeles, just a year or so out of high school, her voice was already a fully formed miracle. Like Aretha Franklin, whom we discussed in episode 6, Linda sang with blazing power and clarity, with that soft, sensual growl underneath, a voice that could easily reach the back row of any arena. Her first band, a folk trio called the Stone Ponies, scored a record deal with Capitol in the summer of 1966. Linda sang lead on about half the songs on their debut album, and it went nowhere. For the second go-around, at Capitol's insistence, Linda was pushed out front, and session players and outside songwriters were brought in. Released in 1967, Evergreen, Volume 2, included the single Different Drum, written by the Monkees' Michael Nesmith. Different Drum made a run up the charts, peaking at number 13 in the U.S., That chart success was the beginning of the end, though. They were now known as Linda Ronstadt and the Stone Ponies, and before long, the other 2 ponies, Bobby Kimmel and Kenny Edwards, decided to split. No hard feelings. This just wasn't what they had signed up for. Edwards went off to India to find himself spiritually, and Kimmel left at the end of their '68 tour. Linda was now a solo act, still under contract at Capitol. Hand-sewn, Homegrown came out in early '69. 1 foot in Nashville and 1 foot in L.A., wrote one reviewer. Others have called it the first alt-country record, which we find a bit hyperbolic, but more like a promising but uneven effort from an artist who hadn't quite found her footing yet. Linda made an appearance on the new Johnny Cash variety show in May of that year and absolutely killed it. There's a bit you can see at the beginning of the 2019 documentary Linda Ronstadt, The Sound of Her Voice, which we thoroughly enjoy and highly recommend. Her second solo album, Silk Purse, had both feet in Nashville. She recorded every track there, with some ace session musicians backing her up. Silk Purse put Linda on the album charts for the first time, all the way to the lofty number 103 of the Billboard Hot 200. Okay, so as 1970 closed out, Linda was not yet a star, but she had established herself as a working musician, and anyone with 2 ears and half a brain could tell she was going places. She took on a new manager, John Boylan. Capitol Records was very high on her at first, but after 3 good but not great albums had cooled noticeably. Linda decided to explore other options. While Boylan set meetings, Linda workshopped new material at Hoot Night and played out at other clubs around town. In early '71, Boylan booked some summer concert dates around the country. But she needed to put a band together. We will be right back with that story after a few words from our sponsors.
Oh, people, look around you. The signs are everywhere. You left it for someone.
John Boylan saw a logistical problem. Linda Ronstadt saw a strategic opportunity. For her backup band, this time out, she didn't want interchangeable session pros. She wanted a gang, a unit with its own swagger. She needed killers. Well, killers who could sing. The first calls were the smart money. On bass was Randy Meisner, a veteran of country rock pioneers, Poco, with a stratospheric tenor. Boylan also snagged multi-instrumentalist Bernie Ledden, an alum of the Flying Burrito Brothers. Both were seasoned professionals. Both possessed serious vocal power. The rhythm guitar slot was Linda's personal call. She'd clocked Glenn Frey at the Troubadour and knew him from Jackson Browne's place. He wasn't just another hopeful. He was a student of the game, a relentless networker. He watched the scene with the calculating eyes of a card sharp. Frey, in turn, pitched his own secret weapon. He knew a drummer from a failed Texas band. The kid was solid, competent, in the pocket. But the real prize was his voice, a raw, soulful tenor that could stop you in your tracks. His name was Don Henley. At the first rehearsal, the sound they made together was immediate and undeniable. The groove was tight. The vocal harmonies were a revelation. When they stacked their voices behind Ronstadt's lead, the air became electric, a seamless, unified sound, a vocal monster born fully formed. For a modest touring band salary, Linda Ronstadt got her killers. Now, at the time, she had no idea she'd just bankrolled the birth of the Eagles.
Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long now. Oh, you're a hard one, but I know that you got your reasons. These things that are pleasing you will hurt you somehow. Don't you try.
The tour was not glamorous. It was a blue highway grind in a cramped station wagon. That crucible of the road forged the band. The raw power they'd uncorked in rehearsal wasn't a fluke. It got tighter and more dangerous with every single show. Then came the proving ground, New York City, the Fillmore East. A collision of worlds, sun-drenched California harmonies meeting East Coast grit and skepticism. A lesser band would have been intimidated. This band wasn't. They came to conquer. On May 9, 1971, the New York Times sent a critic. The verdict for Mike Yon was a stunner. He called the combination of Linda and her band near-perfect rock and roll. He praised her hickory solid voice and the band's gorgeous hard rock. He said their music rested on blues rhythms like a silver boulder. He even put a name to the engine driving that sound, the solid rhythm guitar of Glenn Frey. The Fillmore Review was a massive validation. It proved the chemistry was explosive. It was also a signal, a flash of light before the inevitable detonation. A band this powerful, this potent, wasn't going to be a backing band for long. Their ambition was becoming too big to fit on someone else's marquee. Linda Ronstadt hadn't just hired some musicians, she had built a launch pad.
We'd like to introduce someone who was very instrumental in putting our band, the Eagles, together, and also our favorite girl singer. Would you welcome Linda Ronstadt?
The tour didn't so much end as it evolved. The final gig of the tour said it all. It was a run of concerts at Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. After the Disneyland show wrapped, the four men gave Linda their notice. The split was amicable, and frankly inevitable. The vocal monster they had created was just too powerful to be a backing band for long. The ambition of these boys had outgrown the station wagon, and David Geffen was waiting in the wings. He saw more than a band. He saw a flawless, marketable product, impeccable harmonies, rock-solid musicianship, an undeniable sound he could polish to a mirror shine and sell to the entire world. He signed them to Asylum Records. Almost immediately, their meticulously crafted sound drew a hard line in the sand throughout the Southern California scene.
Man, come on. I had a rough night, and I hate the fucking Eagles, man. Out of a fucking can. Out, man. Hey. Man, hey.
The dude's sentiment is hilarious, and it's practically a membership card for a certain club. In the hipper zip codes of Americana music, it's basically mandatory to dismiss the Eagles. Glib, polished, commercial, no soul, cold and calculated. The patron saint of cosmic American music himself, Gram Parsons, famously branded the Eagles as a plastic dry fuck. Oof. Oh, man. Now, Gram Parsons was the founder of country rock and a tragic figure. A lot of the artists we're discussing in this episode owe much to Gram. He did blaze a trail. But even his best pal, Phil Kaufman, said Gram could be a real prick sometimes, so we won't treat every bitter, drug-addled quote from him as gospel. An artist who never realized his own huge potential doesn't get the final word on the band that conquered the world. And make no mistake, that was the mission. Don Henley's ego and Glenn Frey's ambition were the rocket fuel. Their trajectory was clear. Build a flawless hit-making machine. The self-titled debut album spun off 3 hit singles. They seemed to be on their way. Their producer for the first 2 albums was the legendary Glyn Johns. He and the band clashed constantly. Johns saw their hard rock ambitions as pure folly. To put it bluntly, he just didn't think they had the goods. He fought to keep them focused on their country rock strengths. On Desperado, his vision won out. For a moment, they delivered a concept album about outlaw mythology. It's the last time the Eagles would ever sound this dusty, this vulnerable, or this raw. The ghost of the cosmic cowboy ethos haunting the machine before the machine got retooled and polished to a perfect sterile shine. But Desperado was a commercial disappointment. The machine wasn't calibrated for high concept. It was built for hit singles. After Desperado, they learned their lesson. Midway through the 3rd album, On the Border, they fired Johns and took on a new producer, Bill Simsack. They also brought in a 5th member, guitar slinger Don Felder. The retooling was complete. The machine was now calibrated for a single purpose, to print platinum. This was their leap across the fault line. The chasm yawned open, and they jumped to the safe side, the side that brought them fortune. But they left something fragile and beautiful behind.
I've been walked by the rain, driven by the snow, I'm drunk and dirty. Don't you know, but I'm still willing. Out on the road, late last night, I seen my pretty Alice in every headline. Alice, Alice.
The Eagles flew the nest and circled high above everyone. The Queen, back on her throne in the front bar of the Troub, got to work building her empire. Linda's new manager, Peter Asher of Peter and Gordon fame, was the perfect co-architect. Together, they crafted her 1974 masterpiece, Heart Like a Wheel. The album was less a collection of songs and more a curated exhibition of genius. Her method was simple. find a brilliant, often overlooked song, and then simply sing it better than anyone else had ever done. She took You're No Good and turned it into a blistering, radio-conquering #1 hit. She transformed the Everly Brothers' When Will I Be Loved into a country rock anthem that topped the country charts. She even took a heartbreaking, obscure ballad from her friend J.D. Souther, Faithless Love, and made it a cornerstone of the album. The session players were a murderer's row of the Laurel Canyon elite. Too many to list here, save one. On harmony vocals for the title track, Emmylou Harris, the same singer Gram Parsons had discovered, now lending her voice to the scene's new reigning monarch. The result was a critical and commercial smash, earning a Grammy nomination for Album of the Year. It proved that you didn't need to be a confessional songwriter to make a definitive statement. In the world of the LA Canyons, the ultimate power didn't belong to the poet writing his own diary. It belonged to the priestess who could seize anyone's confession and sing it back as scripture. Every great scene has its yin and its yang. If Linda Ronstadt's Heart Like a Wheel was the scene's triumph, Saturday Night Party, then Jackson Browne's album from that same year was the quiet 4 a.m. drive home alone. It was the sound of the bill coming due. Laid for the Sky, released in 1974, is Jackson Browne's masterpiece, a mature, unified work that grapples with what one contemporary review called the exploration of romantic possibility in the shadow of apocalypse. It is a profound, exquisitely crafted album that feels less like a collection of songs and more like a single, unified, soul-bearing sigh. Produced by Browne himself, alongside LA legend Al Schmitt, the album is sparse and hard. The melodies feel like secular hymns. The lyrics are stripped down to their most eloquent and emotionally honest core. His key musical collaborator was the multi-instrumental wizard David Lindley. Now, if you ever saw Lindley live, the stage held an arsenal of stringed instruments, guitars, fiddles, banjos, mandolins. If it had strings, he was a master. On this album, his contributions are the sound of heartbreak and hope. For a Dancer is one of the most beautiful meditations on life and death ever written. Lindley's violin doesn't just accompany Browne's vocal, it dances with it, a graceful partner in a difficult conversation about the great unknown. In Fountains of Sorrow, Jackson looks at a photograph of a former lover and delivers a hard-won truth. When you see through love's illusions, your perfect lover just looks like a perfect fool. It all culminates with the final track, Before the Deluge, a devastating summary of the era, a eulogy for a generation that started with so much promise.
And in the end, they traded their tired wings for the resignation that living brings, and exchanged love's bright and fragile glow for the glitter and the rouge. And in a moment they were swept before the deluge. Now let the music keep our spirits.
And in the end, they traded their tired wings for the resignation that living brings, and exchanged love's bright and fragile glow for the glitter and the rouge. The song builds to a climax, and then David Lindley. His fiddle solo at the end is a wordless hymn to the cosmos, transcendent, the sound of a soul weeping and soaring all at once. While the Eagles were busy paving over the fault line with Platinum Records, Jackson Browne was drilling core samples. He was the scene's conscious, its chief emotional seismologist. Now, to be clear, Jackson Browne would go on to make records that sold millions more copies. The Pretender is a masterpiece of a different kind, and Running on Empty was a commercial juggernaut. But for our money, and for the story of this specific time and place, Late for the Sky is the heart of the matter. It's the one that tells the truest story. It's a perfect record, a landmark of American songwriting and a lifelong companion. In a song that would later serve as its eulogy, the Eagles lamented the passing of the sad cafe. They sang about a time when it seemed like a holy place, protected by amazing grace. And for a brief shining moment, it was. The real action wasn't always on the stage. It was in the dark wood-paneled front bar, the scene's shared living room, a clubhouse for the lonely crowd of transplanted poets, hustlers, and songwriters. This is where you could find J.D. Souther holding court, or see a quiet, intense Jackson Browne working out a lyric on a napkin. It was a sanctuary built on an unspoken understanding that everyone in the room was a fellow traveler, all of them drawn to the strange magnetic promise of Los Angeles. Sometimes lightning would strike right before your eyes. One night in August of 1970, a shy piano player from England named Reg Dwight sat down on that stage and, in the space of a single set, became Elton John. It was a career detonation, an overnight coronation witnessed by every kingmaker in town. A story so foundational, so important to the narrative of the 1970s, that we're saving it for our next episode. For now, all you need to know is that, for a time, the Troubadour had real magic. It was the epicenter where all the fault lines converged. But the problem with a holy place, a shrine, is that eventually the tourists show up. The magic of the Troubadour became a commodity. The secret handshake became a press release. The clubhouse started to feel like a showroom. The intimate, supportive community of the Hoot Night gave way to a more cynical, industry-fueled meat market. The musicians who had once shared a couch were now competing for the same slots on the chart, and the same producer, the same headline in Rolling Stone. The drugs got harder, the money got bigger, the stakes got higher. The lonely crowd just got lonelier. And the sacred temple of the singer-songwriter began to feel like just another drunken Hollywood bar. Nothing illustrates the shift better than a legendary and deeply sad night on March 12, 1974. John Lennon, in the midst of his infamous Lost Weekend, showed up with Harry Nilsson. The two were blackout drunk, and they started heckling the Smothers Brothers from their table. Lennon, a Beatle, one of the architects of the entire rock and roll dream, was reduced to just another drunken, coked-up idiot shouting obscenities at the stage. Club owner Doug Weston had to personally throw him out. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. A hero had become a joke. The dream had become a hangover. The fault line was no longer a subtle subterranean tremor. It was a gaping crack right in the middle of the floor of the sad cafe.
I went home with the waitress, the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too?
The money changers had taken over the temple. The dream was now a hangover. The scene didn't need a eulogy. It needed an autopsy. And the man with a scalpel was Warren Zevon. Well, sometimes a scalpel, other times more like a chainsaw. He was a man out of step, a hard-drinking, classically trained intellect who'd been lurking on the fringes for years, a veteran of the Everly Brothers band. Warren Zevon's cynicism was a potent antidote to the Canyon's fading idealism. His champion, in the most unlikely pairing imaginable, was the scene's quiet conscience, Jackson Browne. Browne became obsessed with Zevon's songs, convinced David Geffen to sign him to Asylum, and took on the job of producing his self-titled 1976 album. The strategy was pure subversion. Browne meticulously crafted a record that sounded like the polished harmony-laden Asylum standard, even recruiting Ronstadt, Fry, and Hendley for backing vocals. But the lyrics were a field report from hell, a world of mercenaries, headless Thompson gunners, and desperate men making deals with the devil. Warren Zevon was the fault line made flesh, the smooth golden surface of the music barely concealing the violent chaotic reality beneath. He was the dark jester in King Geffen's court, holding up a mirror to the scene's excess and decay, and he was laughing his ass off. 2 years later, Warren Zevon pushed the contradiction even further. His 1978 album, Excitable Boy, perfected the Trojan horse strategy. It sounded like pure, gleaming Southern California gold, catchy, radio-ready rock and roll, polished to a high shine by producers Jackson Browne and Waddy Wachtel. It spun off major hit singles. But listen closely to the lyrics. These weren't songs about palm trees and heartbreak. They were stories about a charming kid who takes a girl to the prom and then feeds her to the lions. About hiding in Honduras, a desperate man pleading with dad, send lawyers, guns, and money. The shit has hit the fan. Excitable Boy took the darkness seeping into the scene and turned it into pop music. Horrifying violence is set to a cheerful sing-along melody. Chilling cynicism delivered with a wink and a hook. It was the sound of the fault line fracturing, but instead of destruction, it produced platinum records. Warren Zevon became a reluctant, darkly hilarious star. Excitable Boy is the ultimate song from the Fault Line album, the perfect encapsulation of the scene that had learned to package its own decay, bottle its own chaos, and sell it back to the world as entertainment.
It seemed like a holy place, protected by amazing grace. We would sing right out loud the things we could not say. We thought we could change this world with words like love and freedom.
The ground had shifted, the energy had changed, the money got louder than the music. The community scattered, chased by success and excess. The place where they all came expecting to fly eventually just wasn't that place anymore. Maybe the fall was inevitable. The scene was built on fragile idealism, on a naive hope that music alone might somehow save you from that fall. Jackson Browne chronicled the cost of a poet's heart. Linda Ronstadt built an empire on the power of interpretation. Warren Zevon stared into the abyss and laughed. In the place they mourned, the sad cafe itself seemed to leave behind a final lingering question, a question posed by one of its own. I don't know why fortune smiles on some and lets the rest go free. I'm Christian Swain, and why don't you meet me at midnight, baby, inside the Sad Cafe? This has been Rock and Roll Archaeology on Pantheon Media. Thanks for listening. Be well, and we hope to see you again. Keep up the rockin'.
Why don't you meet me at midnight, babe, inside the Sad Cafe?
Rock and Roll Archaeology is hosted and produced by Christian Swain. Story by Christian Swain and Richard Evans. Written by Richard Evans. Sound design and incidental music by Jerry Danielsen. If you want to reach us, rockandrollarchaeology.com has links to all of our socials. If you'd like an ad-free version, visit our Patreon page. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved. This presentation is education and commentary, consistent with the fair use provisions of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.